I've already been fucking losing it because of other extenuating circumstances. This is making it worse. This video is fucking crazy. But all right, my fucking insane ramblings aside, a preamble. So, I've never engaged with Ben Jordan's content before, but from what I understand, he's a musician, and we're making a video essay on the witnessing of the death of American capitalism. He decided to get into finance capital. How does the financial system work? And oh boy, if there's something that can make you feel way more fucking depressed than anything, it's learning about how the American financial system works. Because, oh dear. This shit, I'll be honest, when I finished watching it, I started going insane with rage. I was fucking mad. I was pissed. But oh boy. No, there's a reason why I mentioned he's a musician, Boy Meets Mini. It's because it lays threadbare to just how the financial system is bullshit. It's complete fucking nonsense. And I'll be quite honest, I fucking hate private equity. Anywho, we're gonna get started. I put it at 1.5 times. That should be good enough. I'm a very good streamer. I'm really good at streaming, guys.
In early 2020, I started becoming increasingly interested in finance. I know, but this was mostly trying to make sense of the logic behind what the Federal Reserve did in response to COVID, which I'll get into later. But the more and more I learned, the less and less it made sense. So I started deeply analyzing stocks from companies that I was personally and professionally familiar with, such as CuriosityStream and Spotify, which led to me starting a private fund that strategically shorted those companies. I even ended up getting hired as a freelance consultant for venture capital firms. Me, a musician with no higher education whatsoever. And the more
should tell you everything about the sort of myth of fucking meritocracy immediately. Not like, I'm not hating on him for like being a musician or whatever. That's not the point. That's not the problem that I have here. The fact that like literally you make a bet, you make a good fucking bet, right? Doing an appropriate short, betting a company to hit the shitter, two companies to hit the shitter, making a bunch of money off of it. Great. Get your fucking bag, king. 3 claps. I'm giving you 3 claps for that. It more so lays threadbare, and I've had this take before. The stock market is just complete fucking bullshit and nonsense. And I think personally, it might be a fucking problem to base your entire fucking economic structure in society based off of the whims of like dipshit random computer fucking algorithms. Because that's essentially what the stock market is nowadays. It's a complicated set of like random crunching numbers and bullshit where stuff can just randomly happen based off of 3 fucking words in a sentence. Personally, I think basing your entire economy off of that system might make it a little unstable.
The more time that I spent looking at and studying the big picture, the more that I doubted myself, as if the only 2 options were option A, me being unable to understand what every 25-year-old day trader understands, or option B, I'm right and every hedge fund manager and billionaire is wrong. But what if there's a third option? What if capitalism's death wasn't a mistake or something that the ultra-wealthy were trying to avoid? What if the pesky burden of labor laws and taxation could be avoided by deprioritizing the goal of financial profit, or maybe even money itself? This video is going to explain or explore what I and an increasing number of economists think is happening or has already happened to capitalism. More importantly, I'm going to try to encapsulate the unsettling socioeconomic reality that we're living in, as so much has happened in the last decade that it seems foggy to us.
Now, I have not been really saying this because so far I think the main premise of this video is that, broadly speaking, we are at a point where capitalism... I've talked quite a bit about like these sort of consequences of late-stage capitalism, the sort of malaise that we find ourselves with, how like ridiculously commodified everything is. And Ben here gets into that quite significantly with a lot of these sort of companies that's covering. I know he flashed up Uber for a second. You want to talk about like a complete paper tiger, like nonsense of a fucking goddamn company? Oh boy, Uber. Uh, we're just like, hey, what if we just cause the death of a particular industry and then make a bunch of money out of that, and cause such a ridiculous instability within the foundation of this market that now we're going to try to build on top of that unstable sort of foundation that we just created, and try to replace that, and then just cause a complete fucking shitstorm, havoc, just complete chaos within the economy of particular industries. So fuck it, why don't we just do that? And it's just like, I think that might be a bad thing, guys. I'm just gonna say that. I'm gonna throw that out there. More like capitalism, am I right?
You can't fairly describe capitalism without mentioning its predecessor, feudalism. And feudalism was a power structure in kingdoms where wealth was defined by the control of land rather than money. And our history books tell us that feudalism ended sometime in the late 15th century, but there's a much more recent...
Yeah, feudalism, broadly speaking, like, what broadly speaking is, your landlord is your noble, and the noble is essentially like makes his serfs and peasants till the land. They get a portion of the crop that is fucking they get a portion of the crop that is tilled for themselves, so they're able to survive through the winter, and everything else goes to the lord, so then he can pay his tithe to the king. Blah 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 blah. That's how it broadly works. Obvious question should pop up: what happens if that harvest is bad? Well, sucks to suck, right? Because the nobles are all going to be fine. The king is fine. They have giant stores of excess food. But the peasantry, they may have a little bit of a hard time getting through the winter.
Version of it that would be a much better example for the purpose of this video. When the Civil War ended, or when the first American Civil War ended, depending on how far into the future you're watching this video, a lot of former slaves were offered a deal where they could continue living and farming on the same land where they were slaves in exchange for a portion of the crops. In many cases, they would only be able to sell their remaining crops through the plantation store.
Say hello to sharecropping, the failed promise of the Emancipation Proclamation of every former slave being able to build some form of generational wealth through 40 acres and a mule to be able to work the land themselves in order to be able to start a new beginning that wasn't enforced. It got ruined by Andrew Jackson. Was it Andrew Jackson that came after Lincoln was assassinated? Was it? Because he was a Southern Democrat, a racist, and still harbored sympathies for the Confederacy, but he was just like, well, they lost, so no, well, whatever. I want to keep my job as the president. Yeah. Because for whatever reason, like, Lincoln decided, Andrew Johnson. Yeah, because Andrew Johnson wanted to have, like, pussy-ass bipartisanship. It's not just today, folks, of when bipartisanship was dog shit within American Congress. Also back then, I chose Andrew Johnson as his fucking vice president, to have some form of like national unity or some shit. It's just like, brother, this guy stinks.
And with that income, they could participate in trade, which would allow them to buy more tools and negotiating power in hopes to eventually buy land for themselves. By the late 1930s, 2/3 of sharecroppers were actually white, and the Great Depression had shut down enough farms that many of the tenants migrated to large cities to become factory workers. It would be important to note that sharecropping is not technically outlawed today, it's just that American capitalism's growth made it obsolete. The former definition of capitalism is a system in which individuals and private parties control the means of production, and profits are the key driver of economic activity. And it's important to note that within a closed system with no new variables, capitalism's success can almost exclusively be measured by the velocity of money. The classic example is the farmer and the mechanic. This tiny economy has $50 total. The farmer trades $50 to the mechanic for tractor repair, and then the mechanic trades $40 for corn from the farmer, and then buys a barn cat for $10 from the farmer. And in this...
Also, you can broadly see just from this simple example, like I've talked about before, why tax cuts for the rich are just bad, because guess what? The economic concept of velocity of money, the trading of goods and services with money halts, because what the fuck are rich people going to do with that money? They're not going to buy goods. They're not going to stimulate the economy. They're just going to store it somewhere on an offshore account, somewhere, Cayman Islands, Switzerland, wherever the fuck, it doesn't matter. where it can't get taxed. It's not going to help stimulate the economy because rich people don't buy stuff. They don't. Not really, because they don't have to. It doesn't stimulate anything, and guess what? The economy comes to a halt.
Cycle, $100 has changed hands, so the velocity of money is measured as 2. This is calculated as the velocity within a time period equals the total sum of transactions over the total of money in that economy. In a larger modern economy, the classic way to increase the velocity of money is to reduce interest rates, but when spending becomes reckless and leads to higher prices and reduced currency value, the classic move is to make borrowing more expensive. Governments around the world either control or have a lot of influence in interest rates, and some people think that because of this, the Federal Reserve should be abolished. And nobody could predict exactly what would happen if the Federal Reserve was abolished, but it would almost certainly result in a lot of turbulence in the market that would leave a lot of victims in its wake around the world.
I'm just trying to think, right? Like, what would happen if the Fed were, like, if the Federal Reserve was just canned? Because Elon's been talking about that recently. That's a thing that he's just yapping on about constantly. Because again, Elon's an idiot, and he probably saw like some dumb fuck conservative say it somewhere, so now he has to repeat it because again, he's a bot. Like, if the Federal Reserve tomorrow was just canned, would we just be fucked? Because from what I understand, they're the guys who are responsible for printing money and are also hold a lot of bonds within the U.S. Treasury, if I recall correctly. Is this correct? I think. Where are the Americans at? I know Boy Meets Minnie is here. Am I understanding this correctly? And like as a way to try to combat certain like inflationary pressures, they'll cap particular interest rates or increase interest rates to make it. I don't really know a lot about finance either. They'll like cap or allow rates to grow based on sort of like the flow of like what the economy, what the stock market is doing. Almost as if again, guys, it might be bad to base your whole entire economy on around like a random fucking casino where rich people can just randomly play with trillions upon trillions of dollars. I'm just saying.
A useful way to understand how wealth is distributed is to stop using money as a commodity and use something that people actually use or consume. Let's say a can of Coke Zero from a 12-pack. A person with $100,000 in a traditional investment fund like Vanguard would come out to about 312,000 cans of Coke Zero in 2019. That same investment, untouched, is worth about 330,000 cans of Coke Zero now. So sweet, 18,000 cans of Coke Zero for free. Now, on the other hand, a person working for minimum wage full-time in Iowa would have made 43,360 cans per year before taxes in 2019. Today, in 2025, they're making 22,177 cans. Somehow...
That's about half. Think that might be a bad thing. Guys, do you think there might be a problem with the economy if effectively there's been so much concentrated wealth, you know, due to tax cuts for the rich and stuff like that? Do you think there might be a problem with that? Nah, I don't know. I'm just saying.
This person got a 49% wage cut, while the person with the market fund got free soda. Amazingly, through the miracle of inflation, the money decreases in value for everyone, while the actual wealth itself moves up to the top. The concept of the stock market was proposed in 1792, but it wasn't until 1830 when the first stock was sold on the New York Stock Exchange. It was initially filled with railroads and banks, but by the next decade, everybody with a business idea wanted to have their name listed. This rapidly stimulated both technological and economic growth, and by the end of the century, the middle class was getting more and more familiar with investment. By the 1920s, you might be seen as a fool for not being involved in stock trading. In fact, you might be seen as a fool for not borrowing money to buy stocks. Many middle-class investors were borrowing with a 1-to-3 ratio, meaning that they would borrow $300 for every $100 they invested. This sounds absolutely...
So that also, yeah, by the way, besides the fact that people were never paying back their credit cards, that's one of the reasons why the stock market eventually crashed. Ben does eventually get into that, right? Because all this borrowing that's constantly going on over and over and over again without much return on investment, which is why I keep saying, like, a lot of the bullshit that's going on right now, like, you know, between, like, AI, between, like, differing, like, American stocks, all this, like, the biggest thing is AI right now. If this stuff does not have a return on investment, which for the most part has not been, there will be a huge crash. It will happen eventually. The question is just like, what's gonna prompt it? Well, and people need credit just to get by now. Income alone can't fulfill basic needs. Exactly. We are in a, like I've said this before, but we are in a second Gilded Age. People more and more are going into debt in order just to be able to afford basic necessities because everything is just too expensive now. Because wages have not kept up with inflation for the past like 40, 50 years. And eventually, it's going to eventually culminate in something. The Great Recession in 2008 itself, that was a warning for us to what could potentially happen. And how it was dealt with was, well, I would say the can just got kicked down the road. Yeah, just ask your boss for a raise. They'll definitely give it to you.
Insane, but it didn't seem as risky due to the introduction of futures. In the mid-1800s, the Chicago Board of Trade had a pretty great idea to make grain trade a lot more reliable and a lot less volatile. Rather than grain farms having to guess what demand would be at the end of the season, they could sell it at a discount in advance. A future is not a stock or share, but...
So, who knows anything about speculative markets? Because that's what essentially this future shit was. This was essentially the birth of speculative markets, where basically a lot of real estate, not real estate. I keep talking about real estate. It's because I recently did a video about like real estate, speculative real estate investment. That's why. But it wasn't the only thing. The earliest example of these like sort of speculative markets happening was in the 1600s with the Danish flower market. It was in Netherlands. It was in the Netherlands. Dutch tulips. Essentially, a lot of people wanted to buy tulips because they just blew up and became really popular. It was a trend. Whatever. Who the fuck cares? So what happened is there was not enough supply to meet with the demand. Okay. So basically, what started happening where people were like writing IOUs saying like, "Hey, I will have this amount of tulips at this time for you to be able to buy. I can just give you a discount now for the amount now, for like this IOU you're essentially giving me, and you can pay me the rest once I have the actual tulips." That was the idea behind it. And people kept doing this sort of speculative trading over and over and over again, to the point where they started selling their sort of speculative buys to other people for a marked up price. So what do you think happened when people started to try to collect on their investment? There wasn't enough tulips, and the market fucking crashed. It caused like a crash within the Dutch economy. That's how bad it was. Same shit in 2008. Same shit in 1929, although the dynamics are a little different. Same within 2008. The Dutch tulip market, sort of like bubble that happened, I think it was about in the 1600s or 1700s, is sort of like the herald of like the stupid shit show that was to come, that is to become the sort of global economy.
But a contract guaranteeing a future transaction. It just so happens that I have a whole bunch of healthy female chicks who will shower me with more eggs than I know what to do with in about 3 months. And I really could use a little bit of extra money to build an addition to their coop so they could have room to run around with and be healthy egg layers when they become adults. So you, being an opportunist and a capitalist, can buy my egg futures off of me and then sell eggs to restaurants in the summer at a profit and make money without ever having to shovel the heaping amounts of chicken shit that I'll have to shovel. All right, let's go back to the 1920s. By 1919, due to the popularity of futures and people's willingness to borrow money to buy them, a farmer could get $2.09 for a bushel of wheat. This was inflationary to say the least, and even made the sharecropping economy I mentioned earlier more desirable for a brief period of time. It started getting really out of hand.
Hey guys, who remembers the racist sharecropping economy? Who remembers that shit?
And so the Grain Futures Administration was formed and implemented a large mandatory daily ledger and reporting system for traders. The U.S. Secretary of Agriculture would repeatedly suspend the reporting system, creating more volatility and more opportunists taking advantage of that volatility. Then, in October of 1929, as there was more money out on loan than there was circulating in America at the time, and as more wheat was being produced than the population could ever hope to eat, the elephant in the room woke up and took a giant shit on the floor. Everybody tried to get...
So yeah, too much shit was being made. There weren't enough buyers. The whole speculative sort of economy crashed in on itself. And guess what? Because so many people were borrowing so much money to bet on this fucking market, the stock eventually crashed because, oh fuck, there's way too much fucking supply, and in reality, there wasn't that much demand to begin with at all. So guess what? The economy fucking crashed. It's crazy how basically, like, this was all caused because people were just making a bet.
ahead of the crash, which more or less caused the crash. And by the end, a bushel of wheat was only worth 49 cents. And for the next 12 years, capitalism was a failed experiment. Well, wait, actually, for the next 20 years. We like to think that capitalism made its great comeback during the Second World War, but by today's standards, that was,
really.
I'm not even sure if I'm allowed to say this word in public anymore without being arrested, communism. But we didn't just go from the freezer to the frying pan immediately. Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal founded the SEC to protect investors.
No, it's because workers aren't working hard enough. That's true. And yeah, like, here comes the New Deal. The based king, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He basically made, like, the New Deal, what brought in Social Security, the SEC, the
moving forward. It also introduced the Social Security Act and the Fair Labor Standards Act, and prohibited child labor while securing a national minimum wage and workers' rights to unionize. Successful fellows with even a fraction of the wealth that Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos has would have paid a 79% income tax, and companies like Tesla and Amazon would have paid a corporate tax rate of 15%. But
because here's the thing, the wealthy were making out like bandits during this whole time. Same thing happened in 2008. They lost a lot of their money, but they got a fucking leg out because of the $700 billion that the Fed had to print in order to try to bail them out. So instead of homeowners getting bailed out, which is what should have happened, that's what the New Deal did, because who did the New Deal bail out? It bailed out the people. That's what saved capitalism overall. That's why when socialists, broadly speaking, say like the New Deal was what saved capitalism, it's because investments were made into people, whereas with 2008, investments were made into the companies. And guess what? Guess what happened to homeowners? Did the money fucking trickle down from the banks, from the property management companies and everything like that? No. They just pocketed that shit and they fucking left. Thanks, Obama.
The C word wouldn't come until the US got involved with World War II. To say that the war effort stimulated the American economy would be a vast understatement. This was under a closely guiding hand from the federal government, and it was every free market capitalist's worst nightmare by today's standards. Many companies were told what...
Who remembers a fun little guy named Keynes? So this is the basis of Keynesian economics. And this is what caused the biggest and largest explosion in terms of American economic productivity. This is what did it. Keynesian economics. Broadly speaking, when the government decided to finally invest in programs, in committees, in order to help tax and regulate these companies, these billionaires, who were just doing speculative betting and real estate well, not real estate. God, I keep talking about real estate because I keep thinking about speculative real estate markets. When the SEC, unions, more worker power was given, and also the abolition of child labor laws, but that's also a different thing. Because guess what? Billionaires... would they have been billionaires back in those days? No, they just would have been rich people. I think they just would have been the rich. They would have been millionaires. But, effectively, they would have been billionaires. I'm just going to say billionaires. Fuck it. Whatever. Billionaires wanted to make sure that they had as much money for themselves as possible. So guess what? Very often, they would employ children to do work for them. We all know of the meme of, like, the children yearning for the mimes. But guess what? With the New Deal... essentially putting in heavy amounts of regulation with a ton of top marginal tax rates. Keep in mind, the time the greatest economic growth that the U.S. experienced was during the 50s. The top marginal tax rate was about 90%. So, like, I don't remember exactly how much it was, but, like, every penny that was made over $3 million had a 90% tax on it. So that's not an overall 90% tax on the rich. Any dollar made over $3 million, I think it was $3 million a year, whatever. Any dollar made over that threshold was taxed at 90%. So let's say you made $3,001,000. That one extra dollar has a 90% tax on it. You're paying 90 cents to the dollar for that. And that proceeded to make the largest, most what was called the golden age of American capitalism. the largest expansion of the economy and of the middle class in the history of the world was that.
What they would be producing and how much of it they would be producing and how much they would be paying their labor force. American citizens got ration books and stamps and were only allowed to buy a specific amount of staple consumer items like bread and sugar. And if you wanted to buy a car or gasoline, you had to justify a need to the government. Most consumer items that came in metal containers, which was like everything.
By the way, this is the exact same shit that happened in the Warsaw Pact. Everything was rationed out. Now, like, if you were to say that this has happened before to, like, your stupid average, like, American consumer, there would be a huge outrage because our society has become so, like, consumer-oriented and, like, so consumer-oriented and so atomized and individualized that, like, it would really have to take something crazy, like another Great Depression, for people to understand and be like, dude, like, resources are fucking limited. Like, the only way I've said this before, the only way for your average, like, American to be able to learn anything, like the consequences of their consumptive actions, is if it smacks them right in the fucking face. And a Great Depression would have to do something like that. And that's the only way they're going to learn.
Back then, could not be purchased again unless you recycled the container first. This rationing more or less lasted until 1947, and into the 1950s, fellas like Elon and Bezos would have had their income taxed as much as 92%. And again, yes, in modern times, this sounds like a capitalist's worst nightmare, but it resulted in a 37% growth over the next decade and made America the richest country on earth. It is now literally referred to as the golden age of American capitalism. And despite a few brief bumps in the road, things just kept growing and growing and growing exponentially, making us richer and happier and... In the early 2000s, capitalism got so complicated that investors didn't fully understand what they were buying, and that's not an exaggeration. This was by design.
Yep.
There were trillions of dollars to be made by obfuscating what commodities were being sold in your average stock market transaction. A great example. Everybody watching this has heard the term subprime mortgage, but I guess that not everybody knows exactly what it means. It means a risky mortgage.
Yeah, so basically, the subprime mortgage crisis. We jumped a little bit quite ahead in terms of like what happened. Ben, I guess, doesn't necessarily go through a lot of the history, but a lot of the other stuff that sort of happened, it was a lot of the undoing of the successes of the New Deal. Unions got significantly hampered. Worker power basically went out the window. The minimum wage basically was not raised and hardly kept up with inflation. Your average buying power from your like normal citizen just non-existent anymore. And as everything else is being further and further commodified, because again, the Ouroboros of capitalism sort of striking itself, the snake constantly eating its tail, trying so hard to go super hard for constant infinite growth, basically causing a collapse in on itself. So real estate companies sort of figured like, okay, we have a lot of like these mortgages that are kind of like shit ratings, like B's, A's, double A's. None of them were like, a lot of the AAA stuff was already sold out, and that's like the best stuff. So they figured like, hey, what happens if we just take all that bullshit that we have, mash it all together, and just say like, actually it's a AAA, it's very reliable, and you can invest on it. And they trick a bunch of people in order to be able to do that. Come to find out, what actually happened when they found out that those weren't AAA fucking investments, it caused a collapse of the economy. Because guess what? The sort of supply of those like I want to say it's more like a con. The supply of those AAA sort of investments wasn't actually there. It was all fucking bullshit, and due to that, it caused the economy to shit itself.
If you've ever purchased a house, you may have witnessed the wild auction that takes place without your consent or knowledge the moment you sign the mortgage papers, and the average mortgage is sold 2 to 3 times before it's paid off. Here's an example of a 2005 style mortgage. It's an expensive house. It had ninja verification, which means no income, no job, or assets. The credit score is around 500, and it has an 8% or higher interest rate. That's an ARM loan, meaning that it will be adjusted to the market in the future. The delinquency rate of a mortgage like this in 2008 was 25%. So anyway, if you want to buy it, I'll just take 2% of the overall value, and you'll still make a bunch of money when the loan is paid off. Why don't you want to buy it? hang on, I have an idea. Let's make this a little bit of a safer bet. Let's mix it up with some other mortgages here, and I'll get somebody who depends on me for business to give it a rating. And then we can just call it a mortgage-backed security, which is a type of bond. And it's a bit like a future, but it's even better because you can exit the investment whenever you want just by reselling it.
So yeah, this is the thing that I mentioned earlier. It's like, what if we just take all these like dog shit investments that are not good, because the investments that were described there were not good investments. What if we just put it all together, turn it into a bond, and actually make it look like it's safe, when in reality it's incredibly fucking risky? Because guess what? If that gets found out, the system all collapses in on itself, which is what happened.
Now look at this. If that little risky mortgage forecloses, the loan will still be backed by all of the others. And I bet you can't even make out which one was the original loan. And this isn't like some risky stock. This is an investment on housing and land. And you and I both know that God ain't making any more land, right? It is the bedrock of American capitalism, and it's a safe place to put your money. It's gone.
Yep. Bye-bye.
A lot of batshit insane things happened in the 2008 financial crisis. I bet you could probably make some really successful Hollywood movies about it.
Object to the test!
Good. Ultimately, in just 6 months, the Dow Jones lost 54% of its value. Massive banks perished. Washington Mutual, Bear Stearns, Fannie Mae, Lehman Brothers, to only name a few. We needed another new deal before people's bank accounts were wiped.
It is crazy how many fucking goddamn, like, banks just completely collapsing on itself. Oh, and there's a reason why he's saying that people's bank accounts collapsing on themselves. Let's talk a little bit about Ronald fucking Reagan, yet again, that motherfucker. Who decided, guys, what if instead of having a pension plan, we have the 401k plans, which are essentially like, hey, what if instead of having a pensioning plan, so basically how a pensioning plan works is part of your paycheck goes to a fund that eventually, when you retire, gets paid back to you. So, hey, guess what? You're able to live. That's the sort of broad basis of Social Security is supposed to work. It's a little different because the pensioning system, it comes out of your paycheck directly. So, instead of like a tax that gets paid. That's the main difference between Social Security and the pensioning. This is how it works in Canada, for example. Part of the when I make money, I get a paycheck. Part of that paycheck goes into the pension funds. So then I can apply, when I retire, I can apply for those pensions. I can get money for being able to live. You know, my twilight years or whatever the fuck. So, what basically happens instead of that, part of the dismantling of the New Deal is Ronald Reagan was just like, okay, what if we create the 401k system? And the Majority Report has talked about this quite often. What if we make it such that we take, instead of having this pension fund, because that's what the 401k system is supposed to be for, we can give access to private companies to use that system in order to make speculative bets on the stock market. And there's been study after study after study saying how this has just been a complete fucking disaster. And 2008 is the prime sort of example of why it ended up being really fucking bad. People who invest in their 401ks, when they went to take out their money, oh, it's not there anymore. Uh-oh. Because guess what? That shit was tied up in the market, and the market just fucking crashed. A lot of people's 401ks were wiped out instantly. And guess what? They were no longer able to retire. If you were like 60 during the subprime mortgage crisis, during the 2008 recession, you're not retiring. You thought you were going to retire with that 401k, that nice 401k you had. Not anymore. You're getting back to fucking work. Uh-oh.
Wiped. And this time, we tried something a little bit different.
These are not normal circumstances. The market is not functioning properly.
Instead of doing something utterly reckless, like revamping and updating laws to protect workers or creating programs to help the middle class so we could be, on par with the rest of the developed world.
That's true. Labor rights? No, yeah, it's not great in the U.S. I wonder why. Here's the funny thing about this. Bush is also a big reason as to why the subprime mortgage crisis happened. Because what did he do? He gave tax cuts to the rich in, I believe, 2002. There were big tax cuts that the Bush administration gave. And as a result of those tax cuts, what did the companies do? Oh, they used it for speculative bets on the fucking real estate market. Like, he was a big reason for as to why this happened. Big reason. Looking at you, George Bush. You fuck.
We figured that if we just gave $700 billion in bailouts to banks, that money would trickle down and more or less accomplish the exact same thing. Now, you're never going to believe this, but it did not.
Well,
Ultimately,
it
while
happened.
unemployment and foreclosure skyrocketed, the banks experienced a generous heaping spoonful of socialism. And to pay for this, we borrowed money and we printed money. In 2006...
Yep. Fucking, you constantly hear the saying from a lot of lefties saying, like, socialize the costs, but privatize the profits. That's a saying that I probably butchered the saying. I've never been the best at sayings. That is a saying that you constantly hear all the time, and that's why. Every fucking time. And what was the, did MLK coin the phrase socialism? Well, that's a little different. Socialism for the rich, rugged individualism for the poor. That's essentially, like, sort of a, not necessarily, like, because of, I mean, it has multiple meanings, right? It's not necessarily a describing of, like, the consequences of the subprime mortgage crisis. I think that's mostly just a sort of descriptor for us to how the basis of the economy is supposed to work, right? That's more of like an overall broader critique, I think, of the general economy, instead of sort of, hey, the sort of thing that happened with the subprime mortgage crisis, which was the banks were able to completely socialize the consequences of the subprime mortgage crisis, and were able to privatize completely off the gains. So basically, under every single circumstance, the sort of main person that was meant to hold the bag was the average American overall, because they were pretty much in cahoots with the government on this. And we all know why they were able to fucking get away with, like, risky bets like this, because huge tax cut that the Bush administration gave. I think it was either in 2001 or 2002, because there was a big tax cut they just got, so they had a bunch of extra money to play with, so they decided to do this shit to try to do really risky bets to try to make a huge profit. And whoa, all that fucking bullshit collapsed in on itself. Crazy.
The Federal Reserve printed $148 billion in currency. By 2012, that number had increased to $380 billion. The inflation was immediately reflected in home prices, and even more so in the great, awkwardly socialist rebound of the stock market. In 1994, Jeff Bezos was a hedge fund manager who wanted to start an online bookstore, which was already a hard pitch at the time. Why would anybody want to buy books online when they could just go to the library? But it was even worse. He was allegedly transparent to his investors and told them that he intended to prioritize growth over profit for a very long time. All in all, he had 60 meetings offering 1% of ownership for $50,000, and the biggest investors were his parents buying up 6%. With 22 investors, Amazon.com got off the ground with $1 million.
If I recall correctly, Jeff Bezos' parents were pretty rich, right? Yeah, like, he didn't start from his garage. No, that's bullshit. Yeah, he worked in a hedge fund. Like, he had a silver spoon in his mouth. Trust me, there's no such thing. Like, the myth of meritocracy it's bullshit, dude. And here's, like, the sort of basis of the sort of tech economy is coming in right here, right?
By 1999, Amazon was selling everything from books to DVDs to household goods to electronics, and soon after, the company transitioned from being a retailer to an online gateway for other retailers. Amazon customers could pay a low annual membership fee for unlimited free 2-day shipping, and both retailers and manufacturers began to become dependent on that convenience. Retailers weren't the only ones with a dependency problem. Here's 3 stats that will probably fuck up your whole day. By 2021, it was...
So, guys, remember when I said before that it turns out if you keep concentrating parts of the economy to, like, a smaller and smaller portion of people, that might be a bad thing? You know, there's a whole part of Teddy Roosevelt's sort of presidency that was dedicated to antitrust. If I recall correctly, I know that the Biden administration was pursuing a lot of antitrust stuff, which is why Amazon heavily fucking supported the Donald Trump administration, because they knew that this antitrust stuff. I don't remember if they've been on trial with the FTC about their sort of monopolistic practices, or if they were slated to about to go during the Trump administration. I know that Facebook was. Yeah, Google has been. And I don't remember, because like a lot of this stuff is really fucking complicated. I don't know if they were like found guilty of anything in particular, because again, this is like one of those things that just takes so fucking long to sort of like litigate. But it's ongoing still. So more than likely, what's going to happen is that the Trump FTC, once that sort of gets established or whatever, because I know that's like kind of weird. I know that Lena Khan was supposed to be fired. I have not really been keeping up with that at all. Lena Khan was supposed to be fired, and she's the sort of main person that's going in with all this antitrust stuff, saying like, hey, we're going to go after all these fucking tax cheats, all these people that are further monopolizing within the economy, because, hey, guess what? If you only have like one retail for literally everything, it's kind of bad, guys, because they can just charge you whatever the fuck they want, right? And I mean, you see this constantly with like all this fucking price gouging bullshit, right? Fewer and fewer competitors exist out there. So guess what they're doing? Since like a lot of these big box stores, and Ben also goes into this before, and this is the sort of idea with Amazon, what they were doing, why they were primarily promoting growth. They were promoting growth because they wanted to take control of as much of the market under themselves as possible. And then, okay, now that we have control of the majority of the market, we've done all this growth. Now we can just focus on just making profits because everyone's dependent on us. We can charge whatever we want. And that's sort of the strategy, broadly speaking, that a lot of companies are going for. This is why antitrust is incredibly important. Because guess what? We all know this. Here's a perfect example. Internet service providers. In America, there's only like two of them, two main ones. And they have divided up portions of the countries among themselves. And guess what? Those guys are now allowed to charge you anything they want for whatever fucking service. Yep, Spectrum and Comcast. Those are the two companies that only exist within America for internet service providing. They will charge you whatever they want. And there's like been jokes about this in like South Park about this, for fuck's sake. Like, they'll just be like, oh, you want to go to like another service provider? Oh, too bad those don't exist, huh? Because they're correct. They will effectively have control of the countries. It's an effective duopoly, which is why they need to be fucking broken up, and there needs to be a lot more internet service providers. Because overall, it'll force competition. It'll force people to have to bring down their prices and have to provide better service. That's why you have to have it's important to have a lot of companies be able to provide these services. Shit, make it a public utility. You do that too. Yeah, make it a public utility. But if we're still allowing this to sort of be within private hands, public utility is the obvious, like, perfect end goal. That's not probably happening, broadly speaking, throughout the entirety of the U.S., even though it should, but I digress. That's a different conversation. If we're just talking about within the private ownership of the means of production, you want as much circulation of money possible. You want to be promote as much competition and people buying your product as possible. You need multiple companies to be able to provide different services, because a lot of companies right now, they get bought up by larger conglomerates. And what happens? Well, now that they have more and more of the market capture for themselves, what do they generally do? We can just charge you whatever the fuck they want. We're the only option. So you have to pay, whether you like it or not. Doesn't seem like a lot of free choice within the free market, does it? That's a little weird, isn't it?
It was estimated that 60% of the U.S. population were part of an Amazon Prime membership. It is now estimated that only 1% of Amazon Prime members compare prices with other online retailers. And incredibly, while Amazon refuses to confirm this, there are thousands of reports of people finding examples where prices for the exact same products are higher for Amazon Prime subscribers. Does that sound like free market capitalism to you? Walmart.
Yeah, just the thing that I exactly just described. Amazon knows they have a monopoly. They force you to pay for their subscription service so you have faster deliveries, and then they upcharge you on the items that you want. Has anyone ever noticed when you're buying something from Amazon, they always, and this is how they try to get you, I will never own a fucking Prime subscription ever. Fuck that. Absolutely not. Because I know what Amazon, I'm on your shit, bro. You're not going to trick me, okay? Listen, I may be on your fucking platform, but you're not going to get me, Shaitan. Not going to get me yet. Um, Constantly when you're ordering stuff off of Amazon all the fucking time, what pop-up always comes up just as you're about to check out? Hey, do you want to try Amazon Prime for 30 days? Do you want to try it? Do you want to try it? Do you want to try Amazon? You want to try Prime? You want to try Prime? You want to try Prime? Because they want you to subscribe to Prime so they can start upcharging you. That's the point. So guess what? Remember, folks, always refuse those stupid, dumb, fucking annoying pop-ups. Shit's fucking annoying, I know, but you gotta do it. Yeah, you can use your Prime sub here, on twitch.tv/Daharumba. We have a lot of fantastic emotes like Transstride and the other ones.
Walmart had to resort to emulating Amazon's business model in an attempt to keep up. A decade ago, Amazon had surpassed Walmart's market cap, despite Walmart having over 10,000 massive theme park-sized stores worldwide. Walmart is far from the only company trying to mimic Amazon's growth and choke point strategy, and that's a vast understatement, as fast scaling and blitz scaling has become a normal game plan for startups. The definitions vary a little bit, but fast scaling generally means to prioritize growth initially with an open-ended plan to make a profit later. So, for example, if I wanted to fast scale a lemonade stand, I would make a pitch deck for venture capital investors that proposed selling lemonade at
this is the broad strategies that have been I just described earlier, right? Basically, like, hey, we're going to completely choke out all of our competition initially, so then we own the entire market, and now that we own the entire market, we're going to upcharge you for our product in order to be able to make back all the profit of that all that time that we spent on growth.
50% of what it costs for me to make it. This would grow my customer base significantly and starve out the neighborhood children who I'd be competing with. And then, once I disrupted the lemonade market successfully, I'd work out a volume deal with lemon plantations and lower my costs while slowly raising prices for the customers so a profit could be realized. Blitz scaling, on the other hand, is a lot more reckless and assertive. My VC proposal would be to sell lemonade at half the cost, but buy out all of the neighborhood children for their stands. And then I'd buy some lemon plantations, and I'd pay $100 million to have the local football stadium renamed Benn's Lemonade Stadium, and every person in attendance would be given free lemonade if they...
So that's the shit that basically private equity does, right? They'll just completely like price out everyone, buy up all the assets when they go on the cheap, and then just like basically flip it, wreck it, and then just like sell it for a huge profit. That's like your BlackRocks of the world and shit like that, right?
Downloaded my app. You may be asking how on earth that would ever make a profit, but we're going to figure that part out when we've dominated 80 to 90% of the lemonade market and have millions of lemonade drinkers. Right now, we just need to concentrate on disrupting. That probably still sounds like a terrible investment, but if you buy into the initial seed round of the investment, you'll have the opportunity to sell that equity at a premium in a series.
Both of LA's major sports stadiums are owned by finance leeches, SoFi Loans Company and Crypto.com. Yep. A lot of like who remembers like the FTX stuff? Like they were like buying up so much fucking shit. They had like a fucking their name on a fucking stadium. We all know what ended up happening to Sam Altman and FTX though, huh?
A or Series B, or even better, during an IPO launch when the company enters the stock market valued at, $15 billion. To investors in this stage, it's much less about profit and more about a lucrative and risky game of hot potato. An excellent example that we're all familiar with is Uber. Here's the original pitch deck proposing the disruption of the taxi cab industry. It's nearly delusional, claiming that a city's medallion system for cabs is a monopoly and that licensed cab drivers paying for the medallions have no accountability. In the future, digital taxi cab hailing can make, lifting up your hand unnecessary. And when they say
oh no, I can't just be like, hey, taxi, or like calling the fucking like the local cab service, right? Because that's generally how it works. You call them, you say like, hey, can I get a cab here for this time? They're like, yeah, sure. That's it. But you know, oh man, just have whatever the fuck directly on demand. Uber.
Say luxury, they mean prestigious vehicles like used Priuses. And these Priuses driven by non-employees who sign up can be used to drop your kids off at school or transport the elderly. Uber has had over 25 rounds of funding that it has used to raw dog its way into the cab economy and pay for everything from lobbying local governments to settling hundreds of lawsuits. Naturally, once the traditional cab industry was more or less destroyed, the prices got jacked way up. And between 2018 and 2021, the average price for an Uber ride rose 92%. Those early...
Dude, Uber rides, like, trust me when I say that shit should be fucking avoided like the plague. I remember those days when Uber rides were like cheap as fuck, but because like I saw it like pretty much obviously immediately I'm like, oh, wait a minute, there's no way cab rides are supposed to be this cheap. This is sus, bro. This is weird. It's a deal that's too good to be true, and you can tell it's suspicious instantly. Hasn't there been like a bunch of congressional hearings based off of like a lot of the sort of like, what is it? It's called blitz scaling, right? The blitz scaling sort of like model that Uber has been employing, because again, all they care about is just going in there and just like mucking about with the place. So then they can, once they've mucked about enough, they can essentially just outcompete everyone, because guess what? They've destroyed the local economy, and since they have venture capital at their backs, they'll be able to raise the prices for themselves, because guess what? They're now the better and faster and quicker option in comparison to local, which just had their complete business model destroyed. And it's the same thing with like all the food delivery services, right? Same model. There's a reason why Uber also got into that stuff as well. So since they just completely destroyed the sort of like local economy, well, guess what? We can now jack up the prices because we're the only good fast option. True, it's hard as shit to get a cab in LA. Uber arrives faster. Exactly.
Only pre-seed investors who unloaded equity when the company went public will obviously never have to work again. Public investors did not fare so well, and the great Uber IPO launch crash shit show made some of us think that maybe, finally, people are learning not to be bullish about companies that have an annual operating income of negative billions of dollars. And despite this, by 2019, the American stock market gained an impressive 30%. We're back, baby.
Hi, COVID.
While COVID is a hot topic for debate these days between scientists and cult members, let's try and remember how utterly terrifying 2020 actually was for us. The economy obviously screeched to a halt, and many industries have still, and probably never will, fully recover as society was forced to change their economic habits. And while the stock market initially crashed in 2020, within 1 year, it had risen to over 30% of its pre-pandemic levels, despite the economic apocalypse happening around the world. This is
That's a little weird, isn't it? I wonder why that happened. Couldn't be because of any further corporate consolidation or anything. Couldn't be because of any companies trying to justify price gouging off the basis of the inflation that happened and the economic crash that happened because of COVID. No. Couldn't be because of that.
This is because on March 23rd, 2020, the Federal Reserve announced that it would be launching a bunch of new programs like the Primary Corporate Credit Facility, which would buy new corporate bonds, and other programs that would buy existing corporate bonds, mortgage-backed securities, and asset-backed securities filled with student, car, credit card, and business loan debt. The federal fund effective interest rate dropped to 0.05%. And all of this was before any person or local government received so much as a dime in relief. The following month, the CARES Act was announced, which was a free $1,200 check sent out to every American making under $75,000 a year, regardless of their circumstances, with no questions asked on how or where it would be spent. This would be the first of 3 such checks that American citizens received, with a federal tab totaling $814 billion. And for those of my viewers who have been longing for an explanation for the massive increase in hammock sales that year, now you have your answer. These stimulus checks were just a tiny sliver of the overall $5 trillion that the American government spent on subsidizing the economy. And you would be right in assuming that the list of recipients was outrageous. Airlines received more money than SNAP or food assistance.
Who remembers Keynesianism? This is Keynesianism, but bad. Let's be honest here. When the government decides to heavily subsidize all the every dumb fuck private company that's going under because of COVID and the sheer instability of the economy. Because at this point, remember, this is when the Trump tax cuts would have just happened, so the economy was already becoming unstable. It was already shitting the bed, and inflation was going up. The effects of the Trump tax cuts were already being felt at that point, and then COVID made that accelerate significantly and made it, crash. Because guess what? Everything had to come to a halt because global pandemic. Why do you think, again, why conservatives were, so adamant about getting people back to work? Because they didn't want to have, a fucking recession on their hands. And for them to be the main causes of it.
Programs. Payroll tax exemptions got more than housing programs and farmers combined. Massive loans and grants were given to the likes of Kanye, P. Diddy, Jared Kushner, the Church of Scientology. But more
Who remembers the PPP loans? I remember that shit. A fun exercise that you can do, dear viewers, is seeing how much money a lot of your Congress people earned from PPP loans, or other famous people, other big rich people got from their PPP loans. It's a very, very interesting little endeavor you could do.
More importantly, for the purposes of this video, a huge portion of that money went to fintech lenders, investment firms, and venture capital groups like Andreessen Horowitz, which was immediately repurposed into investments into a new, rapidly growing type of economy that some economists refer to as
the dreck.
To help properly.
And the funniest thing is, because of all of this, when people constantly talk about there needs to be another New Deal, there needs to be a Green New Deal, that's why. People constantly harken back to 2008 as the time for when it needed to happen. so much destruction of the New Deal in general led up to 2008 that, guys, we need to just do it again. We need to be able to bring back labor protections because, like, I mean, they're pretty much destroyed. And sure, there was a bit of a resurgence of labor protections, but guess what? Trump's back in office now. And they're just going to get wrecked again. Guaranteed. And guess what? Without like a sort of like New Deal sort of style politics or like sort of style politics or I guess economic investment happening, it's just going to happen again. And like who knows what like bastard child is going to emerge out of the fact that everything is just complete under complete corporate control, because we know like who are the main benefits, who are the main beneficiaries of all these like constant corporate constant economic collapses. It's been private equity and a lot of the just super rich people, because guess what, with all these businesses that are constantly collapsing, they're able to be bought up super cheap, and they're able to be transformed into like some, I don't know, speculative asset for investment, and everything as a result becomes incredibly more expensive. You get priced out of being able to live in a particular area because of this further and further corporate consolidation of all these like local businesses and everything, because guess what? They crashed out because of COVID and because of the Trump tax cuts. This is naturally going to happen if you don't have antitrust to stop all this like corporate acquisition of all these like local restaurants and businesses, and you're just going to get priced down. You're not going to be able to afford anything to eat. The Labor Party is doing fuck all to protect working protections. Shaking my head. I'm so sick of these shallow politicians. Everyone can see they'll protect corporations regardless. There's a reason why a lot of these people have like below water approval ratings. There's a reason why everyone likes Bernie Sanders.
Explain post-capitalism, I need to remind you of the utter absurdity of just having $1 billion. Not only is it impossible to spend on even the most lavish things that you would desire, but it's also very much not like having a garage full of cash. For example, if Elon Musk, with his value of $450 billion at the time of me recording this, if he negotiated a deal to buy South Africa with its total gross domestic product valued at $381 billion, he wouldn't be able to afford it due to the value of his holdings dropping.
Bro is richer than most countries, man. It's crazy.
Significantly as he liquidated the equity. If 13% of Tesla's shares immediately went for public sale, it would create an enormous surplus and the company's value would crash. All net worth does is obfuscate things. Cash is only powerful when you're broke, and it's only valuable when you need or want something that you otherwise couldn't get without cash. What I instead want my viewers to be concerned with is your personal levels of power or control over the things that you earn, consume, and trade. In 1990,
and that is the thing that I constantly hearken on with all these fucking conservatives, right? There's a reason why they protect the rich and why they advocate for the rich as much as they do. Not only because they themselves are also rich, but again, what is it all about in the end? Why do the billionaires do the things they do? It's all about consolidation and control. They're the ones at the top of the hierarchy, and they want to consolidate that control for themselves. That's it. India's richest man has 10% of the country's wealth in a country of 1.5 billion people. Insanity. And guess what? Elon Musk has triple that. 30%. For real. And they'll be like, how do we copy that? Let's do austerity again or scream about asylum seekers. Yeah, again, like, you point out these problems. These obvious issues. And guess what? You're obfuscated or you're fucking silenced. Wait, I thought we cared about free speech here, conservatives. What's going on?
1996, the U.S. stock market had around 8,000 companies listed, and since then, our economy has grown by over $25 trillion, and now our stock market boasts nearly 4,000 companies. In that,
guys, I think there might be a problem with corporate consolidation, guys. Guys, corporate consolidation. That is fucking insanity. That this is the fucking case. Cut in half in about not even 40 years, about 30 years. guys, I think wealth is consolidating more and more. I'm starting to get fucking mad. This is one of the point of this, like right here. This was about one of the points where I started getting fucking mad because it's just like, well, that's a little weird. I wonder why this is the case.
That same period of time, the number of listed companies around the world went from around 24,000 to 51,000. So what is happening here? Why would our variety of public securities drop by 50% while the rest of the world's doubled?
Hi, private equity.
The term private equity means more or less what you would expect it to mean. These days, it's usually a larger company or firm that buys smaller companies and either transforms them from public companies to private companies or just keeps them as private companies, as opposed to a publicly traded company that has a lot more obligations with the Securities and Exchange Commission. In the 1990s, it was estimated that about 2%.
So we've all seen like how essentially like what's the it's just vultures picking away at dead bodies. How many food companies in America? We can get a literal like charted example of that. Here we go. Just found it instantaneously. Remembers this? Remembers this image? This is just food companies. These 10 companies control everything you buy. Remembers this? This is all fucking private equity shit. These 10 mega conglomerates, mega corporations, have complete control over every type of product of food that you can buy. All of them. In the hands of enough companies that you can count on your fucking hands. Now, I personally, I think there might be a little bit of a problem with this. I'm just going to say.
Of the businesses in the US were owned by private equity, and that number has since grown to over 25%. And this includes everything from chemical companies to farms to vets to grocery store chains to food
like in the 90s, it was 2%.
Were owned by private equity, and that number has since grown to over 25%. And this includes
12 times, bro. That's insane, man. Insanity. Like, unironically, like, and it's just gonna keep happening. More and more is gonna be concentrated in like 3 fucking mega corporations.
Includes everything from chemical companies to farms to vets to grocery store chains to food delivery apps to gyms to medical facilities to drug companies. And many of these related businesses are owned by the same investment firms or their partners, which sets the stage for an entire gallery of anti-competitive business practices and tax shielding using tactics like dividend recapitalization. In fact, this is almost unnecessary these days, as a newer trend is private equity firms literally giving one of their portfolio companies a value and then selling it to themselves. But the classic private
We've talked about before about like stock buybacks, right? Because it's like it's essentially the same concept. Like a corporation will buy its own fucking stock back for itself in order to try to like keep it more stable. That's like the purpose of doing that. And it should be obvious why that's probably a bad thing. The economy is all about flow of money, flow of cash. The fact that these guys are like buying their own investments back from themselves, how the fuck do they even make money, right? The question then becomes like, where's the return on the investment? The point is that there is none. The point is that it's the consolidation of the control, right? That's what it's all about for these billionaires. They just want control of everything.
equity business model is borrowing and raising as much capital as possible to buy and sell companies at a profit. And the faster this process is done, the better, as this beckons the velocity of money demonstration that I gave you earlier in this video. You can argue that these are just complex capitalist maneuvers, or perhaps late-stage capitalism, a term that's been used since Werner Sombart coined it in 1928. But even that is not happening anymore. The velocity of these transactions is slowing down significantly, and the average private equity holding time is the longest that it's been in 20 years. The COVID stimulus and the market effect from it.
And that's the main fucking problem with it. This is where I started getting really fucking mad. There's not enough fucking shit out there for you to buy and instantly flip. COVID significantly accelerated this emerging problem. There's only so much out there that you can buy for yourself, flip, in order to make a fucking profit. And you know, we can talk about all the repentant, like, horrid ways about how it's like a profit is made. Generally speaking, through cutting down the workforce. It's like the fastest way to do it. But you know, a lot of tax cheating and other like sneaky little tricks are done in order to be able to do this. But this should be fairly obviously not sustainable. There's a reason why there was a big fucking big fucking raise right here during COVID. This is around 2019, 2020. Because again, private equity snatched up a lot of like failed businesses and a lot of failed companies that went in the shitter because of the pandemic and everything shutting down. Crazy. Whoa. And so they flipped it and sold it back to other companies for a profit, and that's how they make their money.
Led to an enormous boost of acquisitions in 2020. And even though we're now past the median average private equity holding period of 3 to 5 years, exits have been stagnant. What's more alarming is that in 2020, many workers proved to corporations that they don't need to come into the office at all, which also proves to corporations that many of them can be replaced by labor by anybody in the developing world who speaks English. That is a private equity investor's wet dream. So what gives? Does nobody like money anymore? The point of all this maneuvering is decreasing.
The super outsourcing. Let's go, more outsourcing.
Increasingly about turning a profit and increasingly about transitioning to a rent-based economy that hedges inflation. Right after the 2008 financial crisis, investment firms started betting big on farmland, typically hiring local farmers to manage them, but more frequently offering leaseback programs where the farmer continues working but rents the land, ultimately losing control over their working budget and circumstances. Otherwise, since then, and especially since 2020, in almost all cases, investment is not attracted to innovation or profitability, but to business models that act as a middleman offering subscriptions to products or services you would otherwise buy directly. For example, software, movies, video games, parcel, pizza delivery, headphones, cell phones, groceries, clothing, underwear, heated car seats, pregnancy. A rent-based economy has always been present in real estate, but if you're an American homeowner, then you've probably had an annoying...
Yeah, you guys have probably noticed all these fucking stupid subscription-based models that are constantly happening now, right? How that's become super fucking common because everyone, broadly speaking, acknowledges that more and more people can just stay at home during work. There's a reason why there's a lot more subscription-based fucking bullshit now.
Amount of investment groups asking if you'd like to sell your house, and it's not unusual for those investment groups to pay over market value for single-family homes. It also shouldn't surprise you to hear that homeownership has been declining, particularly for millennials, with nearly 2 out of 3 people under the age of 40 being renters. Many argue that this is primarily due to inflation and sluggish wage increases, but the cost-to-income ratio has risen for renters and dropped for homeowners. The wealth gap between renters and homeowners has widened by over 50%.
Yeah, because again, you know, there's student loans that millennials have to constantly pay off, right? Because, man, the way to get the good job is, hey, like, you know, you have to go to school. And here's the thing, like, I've made this, I don't think I've made this argument before, but this is like the same shit, like, when emancipation for black people was supposed to happen, right? 40 acres and a mule. What is the way to build generational wealth? Owning a home. No one can fucking own a home now. So what's going to happen? Millennials and younger generations, guess what? They're not going to be able to purchase homes and start accruing generational wealth for themselves and their own families. And what does that cause? What does that do? Because if private equity eventually ends up owning everything, it's going to create a permanent underclass. If no one is able to, say, buy a home, accrue generational wealth for themselves, like, I've already co-signed myself to, like, sort of the situation. Bro, like, I'm not going to own, generational wealth. Probably fucking not. I'm going to be fucking screwed. Yep, same shit that Rohan mentioned about Brahmanism in India. Happening here. Exactly. Like, and just as you said earlier, Boy Meets Mini, yeah, you want to apply for a mortgage? Do you have a college degree and a salary job? Okay, we'll give you a mortgage. Otherwise, you're not getting that mortgage. The bank will deny you. And so, if you're not able to buy a home, you're not able to start doing investments in those homes, growing the sort of so not being able to invest in that home, not being able to see its value accrue more and more and more as it, you know, exists within the market, because you're not a homeowner. I'm probably never going to own a fucking home. Most millennials, Gen Zers, and other people, they think like that, right? It's a fundamental problem with the economy because private equity keeps buying up all these fucking goddamn companies. And it's not only companies now; they're also going after housing as well. That's another thing that they're doing in order to be able to flip it and make as much of a profit on a speculative asset as much as possible. Be able to price out aspiring homeowners to be able to try to, build a family for themselves. Because guess what? Private equity are never going to sell those houses to you because they want that as a speculative asset. They want to be able to bet on it with the market in order to have it as an asset to inflate their fucking stock portfolios. That's the point. And people wonder why there's a fucking housing crisis going on all over throughout the fucking all throughout Canada and in the U.S. Private equity constantly buying out all these luxury homes in order to bet on them to try to stimulate foreign investment. That's the point. And yet, local populace is what's going to be priced out. They're not going to be able to buy those homes. Forcing them to have to go out further and further to have to try to buy some kind of a home somewhere. I have to get vehicles, insurance, to have to pay for gas in order just to be able to go to work, in order to be able to pay for all this stuff. And guess what? This cuts into that, ability to build generational wealth. Because you're not going to put money aside for savings. You're living paycheck to paycheck. And eventually, that foundation is going to be fundamentally cut out from under there. Yeah, but we care about family values. Yeah, conservatives sure do care about that. And eventually that foundation is going to be completely cut out. And the economy is going to collapse in on itself again. Because it's not stable. The price of infinite growth showing itself.
In the last decade. In lower and middle class households, white people are nearly 2 times more likely to be homeowners than people of color, meaning that younger minority groups are likely to be increasingly disproportionately punished in the future when you take all of this data into consideration. Profit and even money itself is only really valuable when it buys power. And if a societal system can be engineered to gain power without profit or money, capitalism begins to exist as something to exploit within that system under its umbrella. It sounds hyperbolic, but it needs to be said a lot more often. Most of us do not realize that we are in a constant battle with billionaires who don't want us to own things, but rent them. And when we don't own things, we lose control over our own budgets, lives, decisions, and ultimately our own destinies. Here's a pertinent example.
And there is the exact fucking key where it all just clicks. That's the fucking point. Why are there constantly all these dumbasses saying it's much better to rent than to own? Why are there all these fucking subscription models? Because again, you do something that's bad, you can get instantaneously kicked off because the company is the thing that has ultimate fucking control. Like I said before, what is it all about for these billionaires besides making all the money in the world? Maintenance of hierarchy, maintenance of the society of control. Deleuze and Guattari essay withstanding.
Did somebody that you know send you a link to this video, or did you type in Ben Jordan new video and find it that way, or was it recommended to you by an algorithm, or was it?
This video was recommended to me by an algorithm. I didn't find this video. When I posted this in my Discord, under my content suggestion page, what did I say? Because no one else posted it there. I was the one who posted it there. Seen 2 minutes of this, and I'm instantly intrigued. Karl Marx has much to say here. It's, oh boy, and he does have much to say here. There's a reason why I haven't been mentioning much about our favorite little bearded Santa-looking man, but there's a reason why he talked quite often about the consequences of capital being concentrated into fewer and fewer hands. I guess there is mostly a reason why I haven't been really mentioning it all that much. Haven't really had an opportunity. There's so much to talk about. The fact that literally it's all about just the maintenance of hierarchy. That's the point. First and foremost. All the hegemon on top maintaining their control. That's what it's all about. That's why you're going to get worse quality products, having to constantly pay for a fucking subscription in order to be able to have access to these worse quality fucking products, because the companies, broadly speaking, they know that you're the only ones that they can go to in order to buy their fucking products. What do you think is the likelihood that eventually, you have, a subscription-based service for buying food? That's literally a thing that Uber Eats is trying to do right now. which is crazy. Or like you can take out a loan for buying food. A loan for buying food because they know they can make a profit by charging you interest on that stuff if you can't pay the loan. That's insanity.
Was it placed on your sidebar, or did it autoplay when another video ended? This next and final chapter is very much about the type of transaction that you and I are having right now. Me working without benefits, guaranteed pay, or protections to make something to use as bait to get you to either watch targeted advertisements or pay $14 a month without even being offered a chance to indefinitely play the video file offline on your own device. And while you do that, your every move is being harvested for data to empower the company. Let's take a look at this definition again and let me know how well it describes our little transaction here. Capitalism is formally described as an economic system in which individuals and private parties control the means of production, and profits are the key driver of economic activity.
How well do you think that describes our certain little interaction here? Do you think that describes it well? Because what he's saying is true. Well, we haven't had any advertisements because of, like, ad blockers and whatever. There's a reason why these companies really fucking hate ad blockers and try to find their ways around it constantly. There's a reason. Does that really describe well? Does Benn here own the means of production when he's just presenting this video to me? Not really. He doesn't own the platform that he's posting it on, but he's the one who's having creative liberties and freedoms in what he's saying. That's why, like, the sort of, like, question between, like, our content creators, proletariat or bourgeoisie, are kind of silly to me, to be honest. Because as far as I can tell, do I own a part of Twitch? I can talk about whatever I want, right? And, you know, we're going to get into the Marxist concept of concrete versus abstract labor. It also gets mentioned here. What I am doing right now is abstract labor. I am doing labor. I'm not covering this video because, like, I have, like, an obligation to do it, or because it's, like, hard manual labor. I'm doing this because it's an interesting topic that I want to look more into. That's abstract labor. I'm willing to put in a lot of time and effort to sort of, like, describe and to talk about, like, thoughts that I have on this video, which is a very good video. It's fantastic in terms of, like, making you hate the financial system. About how fucking shitty it is. And overall, it's all about one thing and one thing only: consolidation of control. That's it. That's all that this has always been about. Consolidation of power amongst an even smaller and smaller amount of people. Now, if I was served targeted advertisements, my data is being harvested, whether I like it or not. I speak into this mic, my data's been harvested. Nothing you can really fucking do about that. Thank you, deterioration of your private rights, all due to security theater. One of the main reasons why it's happened. Is it accurate to say that there's an exchange of goods and services here? Not really. Because Benn doesn't technically own the means of production. Not technically speaking, not in, like, the purest capitalist sense of the term. Not really. YouTube and Google are what own the platform that he posts on. Just like me, I don't own Amazon or Twitch. Not really. Not at all, actually. They own the platform that I'm currently posting on. So is it really safe to say that, like, this is like an exchange of value normally conducive with capitalism? Not really. It's a little different. It's a little weird. I do wonder what Marx would have said about stuff like this. Yeah, he's gonna get into the concept
Long before the pandemic, the
digital
foundation had already been laid for an economy that transcended goods and services. Facebook's Cambridge Analytica scandal, where 87 million users were psychologically profiled without consent and served political ads, was hugely associated with both the 2016 presidential election and the Brexit referendum. Many people believe, including whistleblowers who work in the data centers, that without Cambridge Analytica, the UK would still be part of the European Union. Better yet, here's a leaked debriefing slideshow from Cambridge Analytica giving themselves credit for using mined personal data in combination with misinformation campaigns to win an election. As Americans were concerned and distracted by claims of voter fraud and hacked machines, we forgot to notice that democratic elections don't work when news and information are no longer democratized. For example, in most dictatorships, the government will have an office that permits or denies which stories can run in the newspaper. In 2020,
similar to what is broadly done in America. Who are the main aggregators of news? Private fucking companies. And they get to cover what they want to cover because, again, for them, it's not about making informed citizens. It's about profit. Guys, I think it might be a bad thing that that all these like why do you think all the fucking billionaires also buy like their own like news outlets and stuff? Like Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post, for example, right? There's a reason why. Because they know that, hey, we want to have like what we believe is best out there to, well, essentially help us make more profits. That's why, like, that stupid ass Jeff Bezos thing of like, hey, you know, that stupid ass like Jeff Bezos decree saying like, hey, op-eds should now only talk about how good capitalism is actually, and we're gonna take a look at that. There's a reason why he did that, right?
25, every piece of news that the average voter sees is manipulated by a third-party aggregator. Even if you go to something like Google News and select the generalized headline areas, your feed will be different than mine. This disequilibrating of information was concerning enough when it was being done for ad revenue and profit. But now, it's about a lot more than that. Whether capitalism is healthy or unhealthy at any given point in time, it has always provided the framework for negotiation between profit and labor. In Karl Marx's critique of political economy, labor is broken into two subcategories. There's abstract labor, which is what I'm doing right now when making this video. I'm learning, I'm gaining experience, I'm sharing information, and overall, I'm just feeding my passion. And the other is concrete labor, which is what somebody would be doing if they were holding a boom mic over me or making me coffee. Capitalism obviously requires concrete labor, but it thrives on abstract labor as it provides organic growth. And the problem is that you can't just snap your fingers and get abstract labor. You can't even buy it because someone's passion and happiness is more valuable to them than a commodity. So
you're looking at you, Elon, who tries to do that all the time by fucking trying to pay people to do to play video games for you. It even like goes a bit into like the sort of like idea behind fragile masculinity, right? Because what do these billionaires want more than anything? They want like some form of passion and you know, abstract labor within it, because they have the, I guess, like the means to completely control and own concrete labor, but being able to make an influencer, they can't. All these like corporate sponsored like fucking who remembers like they've tried this before with like these random corporate fucking sponsored influencers. Like who remembers like those weird AI influencers made by like different companies? Those all fucking immediately fail because it's like bro, this is like full of shit. What the fuck is this? This is not authentic. There's no passion here. There's no creative anything here. You're just trying to like buy a fucking goddamn like influence. You can't just do that. Well, not yet. Eventually, like there will be a way that this sort of works. And I like the sort of concept here of like digital sharecropping. Essentially like the sharecropping system being you know sort of adapted to the digital sort of space. Like, it's really interesting how, like, it all just goes back to feudalism, right? Like, sharecropping was also, like, feudalistic in nature. And, like, a lot of this, through, like, digital, like, data harvesting and stuff, is very similar to, well, another sort of technological feudalism, right? There's a reason why, like that term gets thrown around now, right? Because, like, companies harvest the crop that is your information in order to be able to sell it to other people. It's quite insidious, to be honest.
Corporations classically try to generate it through morale-boosting corporate programs and retreats and
And yeah,
parties.
this
This has been a major challenge since the Industrial Revolution, even when you're paying a competitive salary, health insurance, 401k, and bonuses. But when you hire gig workers that have no benefits, labor protections, or even guaranteed income, which, by the way, is often below minimum wage, how can you expect to extract abstract labor? And abstract labor in value is extremely high in creative industries. How can you expect musicians to, on average, spend more in fees to give you their music than you'll ever pay them in royalties? How can you expect an app or game developer to give you 30% of their income when you're not even offering support or advertisement? Or shit, how can you expect somebody to buy thousands of dollars of camera equipment to start a competitive YouTube channel?
Yeah. There are ways they try to do it, but like I said before, like with the example that I provided with like those AI fucking like weirdo influencers, it doesn't work. They're trying to figure out ways. I mean, this is like also part of the reason why these like companies are so heavily invested and interested in AI, because they just want to create creativity out of nowhere. You have control over an AI, right? That's like the current sort of like latest iteration with like AI art and all this fucking bullshit, right? They're trying to create creativity sort of spontaneously and out of nowhere, but it's never going to work, because what art is good and successful? When people make it and have a lot of passion and they put in their own thought and their own work into creating that piece of media or artwork. There's a reason why, again, why all these like billionaires and all these right-wingers fucking love AI art, right? They love this shit. And it's fairly obvious why. Because it's all about maintenance of control. First and foremost, remember the first order principle. Maintenance of the hierarchy, maintenance of control. That's why like conservatives always talk about like the modern art and, you know, death of subjectivity. All of the sort of stuff that I've talked about before, all culminating into, well, something trying to be built out of this. And no one is ever going to see this as like honest or like good or high quality or whatever. Like, I guess like AI art is like the sort of most naked version of this in essence, but no one's ever going to like this, because you can just see right through it instantly. People are just trying to buy influence. Yeah, like you said, Boy Meets Mini, that's not what it's meant to be. It's just like a bastardized amalgamation. It's crazy. AR art is just a streamlined corporate graphic design. Exactly. By stealing shit from other people. And that's like the sort of like latest iteration that people are trying with this shit. I mean, there's also like other like political implications of stuff like that, but this idea of like, you know, Apple's 30% App Store fee will soon hit Patreon subscriptions. It's all about exacting as much control as they can. You know, the Steam's a 30% cut as alleged antitrust behavior, now classified as class action. This is all stuff that Biden administration was heavily trying to go after, because again, all about that corporate consolidation, baby. That's all that matters. First and foremost.
Camera equipment to start a competitive YouTube channel. Okay, other side of the coin. Why would I, a YouTuber, take a modest salary to produce, shoot, and edit short stories for, I don't know, the New York Times, when I can have full control over my content where I'll be rewarded appropriately for all of my hard work? Or why would somebody work for a chauffeur company when they could set their own hours depending on how much money they needed in any given week? According to YouTube's 2024 Culture and Trends report, 65% of Gen Z identify themselves as a content creator. And YouTube does...
It's fucking fascinating that is the case. Yeah, that is bad. But I think it's also interesting, right? I think that's actually fascinating because, broadly speaking, everyone, what do they want? They want to own their own means of production. They want to have the overall control. Do most people want to sit at like a corporate desk job where they have like a boss like constantly haranguing them in the ears all the fucking time? If you're a content creator, it's broadly framed as if, oh, you have complete control and you can just do whatever you want and you become like rich or whatever. You just have to be authentic and just put in the work. Not actually how that works 100% of the time. You have to get very lucky within the algorithmic systems because, again, you don't own the sort of platform that you post on. There's a company that owns that. And they ultimately have, through the algorithm, the ultimate sort of last say for as to if you can be pushed throughout the algorithm. TikTok has like technically a way that kind of gets around this. So long as you keep posting, the algorithm will naturally push some of your videos. You just have to keep posting. And like a lot of other like platforms are trying to follow this model. Twitch doesn't do this at all. But YouTube kind of does it. I don't know how like Facebook or like Twitter does it. I mean, Twitter, it's like you pay $8 to Elon and then like it just kind of does it, I guess. I don't know. It's bullshit. Don't pay for Twitter Blue. That shit's crap. Don't do it. We broadly speaking, we have like an idea and we understand that hey, we want to be our own masters, right? This sort of like individualized idea of like, you know, I want to be able to make my own decisions, right? This sort of like individualized myth. And we all know that like there's problems and consequences of that. The sort of like attitudes that are generated from that is not good. But I do think, broadly speaking, that 65% of like Gen Z see themselves as content creators or want to see themselves as content creators. Bad, not good. But I think there's like an interesting recognition you can make there of like, these are people who want to be their own sort of like masters of their own destiny, which I think is interesting.
Doesn't exactly hide why this is such good news for advertisers who intend on capitalizing on this societal snowball effect. But we can assume that when that generation enters the labor force, they won't exactly be bringing high levels of abstract value to the car insurance claims adjuster cubicle. But this is nothing new. Long before the pandemic, the labor force participation rate had dropped significantly from its peak in 2000, and you can see the decline growing exponentially as big tech entered the economy. It obviously crashed during the pandemic, and now, even though labor force participation was at a 35-year low in 2019, we still haven't even recovered to that level. Meanwhile, in 2024...
Dude, all the fucking boomers who constantly complain about this are so fucking annoying. It's like, why do people not want to go back to work? Because the jobs fucking suck, man. They're unfulfilling, they're uninteresting. Like, why the fuck would you want to work at like a fucking cubicle? Where you are gonna have shit hours anyways, and the work you do is unfulfilling, uninteresting, and you don't have a say over anything. That's why people don't want to go back to it. And you don't get paid for it? Like, there was an interesting thing that I saw, and that is a value that Gen Z has now quite often is they want to have a lot of money. And I think that's a pretty bad thing, to be honest. Like, why is that an attitude that is now being sort of embodied? A lot of it is a byproduct of social media influencers living lavish lifestyles and people being like, oh, dude, that looks so cool. I want to fucking live that. But also it's because of a consequence of, hey, there's a lot of corporate consolidation of money. And guess what? Other people also want a piece of that. They want to be paid for their work. They want to feel like they're being able to contribute or do something within society. Like, this is like very, very... Yeah, everyone wants to be fucking Kai Cenat. Doesn't work like that, obviously. Kai Cenat does work for an org. I'm not saying that he's like inorganic or whatever. Like, they're an org that helped like organize things for him or whatnot. He's just like a face, one of the main faces of that org. But why do you think people want to do that? Like, because they want money. And they want to get out of the sort of capitalist malaise that we find ourselves in. Even simple jobs are becoming harder to get. Tills at supermarkets are usually self-to-go, and it's so competitive. No wonder why so many young people are unemployed. I'm still fucking unemployed. Every time I try to apply to a job, over 100 applicants have applied for this job. And there was a recent big layoff spree at all the fucking tech companies in Canada. So guess what? It's all shit and competitive. It's a complete shit show right now. And it's not very satisfying or good work. I have no doubt that inevitably, and I keep having to explain this fucking concept to my parents, who get real fucking annoying about it. I'm like, dude, you are aware, this is just a cycle that constantly fucking happens. They do this all the fucking time. Because again, it's not about like, it's like companies don't do this because like, they're failing or whatever. It's all about like making as much profit as possible. Also, anyone complaining that the jobs get shipped to India, that's not the case. Job growth has been negative there. Exactly. I don't know about like the rest of Southeast Asia. Do you know what those statistics are? Boy Meets Mini. Like, what are the statistics of like job growth throughout the rest of Southeast Asia? Like, you know, Indonesia, throughout French Indochina, not French Indochina, Indochina in general. I'd have to check, but I know South Asia's job market is on the decline. So it's not because of outsourcing. It's because of like what I said before. What is one of the easiest ways for corporations to turn a profit nowadays? Cause a crash, acquire stuff, acquire stuff when it's on a fire sale, and be able to sell that as quickly as possible for a profit. They figure they don't need people to They don't need people to do jobs these days if AI and robots can fill it in for them. Well, they're not quite. They're trying to make it that way. Not quite there yet. But that's sort of the next evolution of the sort of like gig economy work that we have right now. Because that's what we do. Like, you can just be easily fired. Like I said before, 75% of like a team that I used to be a part of in my company was fired. Well, not fired. They were let go. And why? Because the excuse was, we're not finding current success within the Canadian market or whatever. Bullshit. No. They wanted to make more profits for themselves. I know what it is. Like, I should know. I got let go from that job. I just got caught in that fucking wave. And it shows a fundamental problem with the economy itself. But a lot of people don't want to fucking understand this. The other big problem with this is lack of expertise. People just project hop and quality goes down. Yes, I have a big problem with that as well, Boy Meets Mini. People just constantly having to go around. Like, if I have to go to another company, guess what you have to do? You have to spend time training because I need to learn the sort of, like, eccentricities and, like, methodologies that company uses, right? You have to know about that. It's like an artificial sort of like creation of like a labor pool. It really angers me. The UK has an aging population. The older people are obsessed that Gen Z is the most unemployed generation in decades. Yet many older people will blame young people, make bad decisions, i.e. Brexit, and blame immigrants. Oh, you know, we love to shit on fucking old people in this channel. You know, I fucking hate old people, dude. The self-entitlement that all these old fucking fart sniffers have, who barely fucking understand the nature of the fucking economy, and are willing to be like, oh, why are you so unemployed? Why can't you find work? Because the economy is fundamentally fucking broken because it's more and more concentrated in fewer and fewer hands. It's all fucking broken. There's no competition. And the competition that does exist for these fucking companies who want to recruit as low of a labor pool as possible to create desperation and that competition artificially because they think that'll make the best of the best of the best, when in reality it's just starving for the fucking sake of starving. And yeah, all those older people fucking voted for Thatcher. It was a big reason for as to why this is the case. Fucking assholes. That's why I fucking hate old people, man.
36% of US workers were participants in the gig economy. It is projected that by 2027, that number will have grown to over half of the entire American workforce. I wonder what could possibly make everything that I told you in this chapter 100 times worse.
Oh boy.
In the late 1990s, we quickly realized how powerful marketing could be with the innocently named
Sentiment
cookies,
analysis.
which simply track a user's activity with the primary goal of optimizing targeted advertising. When Facebook introduced the like button in 2009, the power of sentiment analysis was realized, and it would only be a few years before you telling your aunt that you bought a new grill would lead to you seeing ads to get you to subscribe to meat subscription services. Hey, look.
Oh man, if you thought the harvesting of your data is before, like I said before, I've talked about this before. If you say particular products into this fucking microphone, into this little fucking piece of shit computer that it's in your pocket all the time, there's a reason why you get constant fucking advertisements of those products. There's a reason why Amazon will start being like, hey, you want to get this thing? You want to get it? It's because the companies are listening in on you. They're using that sentiment analysis, those things that you like, in order to be able to push more products onto you for you to buy from that company.
Look, there's a coupon for the annual plan. Congratulations. For the next year of your life, the meat you grill will be chosen for you. It won't be graded like the meat you get from the butcher. It won't be FDA approved, and you'll pay more while a farmer on the other side of the world earns less. But it wouldn't be until the recent AI boom when sentiment analysis would become sci-fi levels of terrifying. Facebook has lost popularity while young users migrated to Instagram and TikTok. Now, to participate in your social group, you are required to create content. And when you do that, AI analyzes the sentiment of the content, and if it's not saying or showing anything that isn't of interest to the platform, for example, talking about a government coup on TikTok, then it is viewed by users who have shown interest in that topic. The content would then be graded by the amount of time that users would spend looking at it before moving on to the next photo or video. And the higher it scores, the more people it's shown to. And once it's graded as a useful video, it is shown to people who are most likely to feel rewarded by watching it. An algorithm priority and optimized placement in the cycle can be purchased at a premium, in which case TikTok also takes between 10 and 15% commission of a sale. So if I wanted to make some edgy, catchy t-shirt that said, I don't know, rip capitalism, for example, and sell it in this vacuum of an economy that TikTok has, I'd go through a drop shipping service like Printify, who would then act as a middleman for finding a printer. And Printify, of course, offers a subscription too, and they make money from both the printers and the designers. In this cycle, abstract labor is either unpaid or paid pennies on the dollars in comparison to the wealth that their labor generated. This isn't exactly a speculation or a prophecy either. As of 2025, 1 out of 3 young people have shopped on social media in the last week, and another study of 14,000 global consumers has shown that 91% of people prefer buying cosmetics on social media. 81% of the people in that study prefer buying clothing that way, while only 57.
The one reason I bought Hassan's merch is he goes through a worker-owned independent union shop. That's the best way to do it, generally speaking. Because nowadays, it's all like drop ship, third-party fucking shit. Or you can go through like, another person I would suggest is, I've mentioned it before. AOC's merch is made that way. You want to know who else's merch is also made that way? Bricky's merch. He does all of his stuff in store, in shop. All of the merch that he made, he has a merch store and he makes it all in fucking store. Of course, he has his own press, his own like little press and everything. The only thing he has to do is like buy the fucking shirts themselves, of which he typically tries to do it through, well, American sources, union-owned shop and shit like that. That's another person who does it as well. And it's a trend that I've started to notice as well with a lot of like these more a lot of the content creators trying to focus on like, how can we be as ethical as possible with this, or at least try to, and try to make some kind of a profit, I guess. There are people who do it. It's the profit on it is just typically bad, or you make a loss on it, which is generally why it doesn't really happen all that much. I assume Hassan's merch is probably pretty expensive, right? Because worker-owned independent union shop, they're gonna charge a lot for materials and being able to fucking make that stuff. Which means if Hassan wants to make a profit on merch, well then, you know, he has to sell it at probably quite a marked up price. I'm not sure if he does that though. I'm gonna assume probably not. But yeah, this is how people generally buy stuff. It's all like drop shipping bullshit. You've seen like the TikTok videos as well of like all the fucking drop shippers like advertising like all these different fucking products. Happens all the time.
10% even bother trying clothing on before purchasing them. And again, one could argue that this is merely capitalism on methamphetamines, but a store like Kohl's employs 96,000 people. Printify employs 760 people. Kohl's sales have declined for 11 consecutive quarters, and it can be expected that their payroll will shrink along with it. The reason I'm using clothing as an example here is to show you how powerful sentiment analysis is at converting consumers to this new economy. 15 years ago, if you proposed the idea that the value of a video app would be higher than, I don't know, seeing how your clothing looks or fits on you before buying it, you'd be laughed at. The majority of the income from these everyday transactions adds up and now goes to firms that were subsidized with venture capital. And I can only imagine that being an actual manufacturer is less and less desirable, which may additionally explain why labor participation is at historic lows. In the last 2 years, as AI was being shoved in my face virtually everywhere, as I'm sure you have experienced as well, my Google searches now open a sidebar telling me about my previous search that I don't have patience to sort out, or if I want to make sure that a replacement vacuum hose...
Dude, like Google with the fucking AI overview shit, I fucking hate that stuff, man. That shit's so fucking ass, bro. I'm gonna be honest. Fucking hate that shit. And yeah, like, you're wondering why like labor is like, it's not because it's like, it's part of it is because it's unfulfilling, but part of it is also because, like, dude, there's such a ridiculous fucking consolidation of all forms of like labor nowadays within the economy that of course like people are just not gonna want to fucking participate in it. Like, why would they? I mentioned this earlier, between like the pay and everything else. Why would you want to go to work? Work fucking sucks. It's like, yeah, I agree. Better to try to make it as like a fucking content creator.
Works with my model of shop back on Amazon. Instead of searching through reviews and answers, I now have to talk to a bot named Rufus about it. This is happening with emails,
Dude,
with messaging apps, image editors, everything.
God, there's so many fucking chatbots. You go on a random website, and the chatbot's like, how can I help you? I'm like, fuck off, not interested. Go away.
I was initially really confused by this because virtually nobody likes it. It changes familiar workflows of users, which risks somebody leaving your ecosystem. And it's really expensive. Just one round of training an LLM or large language model can cost over $200 million. And that's not to mention the hugely increased processing power that needs to be done every time that you query that model. And all of this is just happening automatically just to beg us to use it.
We love
Why?
AI.
The reason that so many cloud-based companies are dumping so much money and resources into pushing this technology on everyone is to capture the part of our routine that comparison shops or researches or asks for advice or arrives at a logical conclusion about something. If you become friends with ChatGPT or Gemini or Rufus or Siri, and you consult with their vast informational resources on a more personal and casual level, you're not only supplying them with the purest form of sentiment analysis, but you're helping them build a system that will further control not only your decisions on what to buy or subscribe to, but what hobby you'll take up next summer. Not only is it influencing your decision on where to buy.
So guess what they start to do? Yeah, like with the sentiment analysis. They start to push advertising to you to try to buy that thing. Uh-oh. Because you're giving them the most valuable of information.
An engagement ring or where and when to go on vacation to propose to your partner.
I think it should be fairly obvious why an economic model like this is incredibly unsustainable. Because what is the sort of tangible product? Unless we've like moved beyond a fucking economy where you just don't need tangible products. You don't need like anything at all anymore. You can just like say random fucking bullshit and guess what? You get an advertisement for it, which is insane, dude.
There's nothing stopping it from influencing your decision on whether you should get married at all. It would be very naive to think of digital assistants as your assistants. They are very much not there to help you, but to help their owners. And the conclusion that most of us has is that they're there to help their owners make more money. But in the case of things like the Cambridge Analytica scandal or Twitter quite literally and intentionally becoming an interactive right-wing propaganda tool.
Yeah, exactly, Boy Meets Mini. Content slop, this is why it's on top. It's quite literally just the consequences of the destruction of education. Quite literally. Is being played out right here. Because companies with these chatbots, with all the fucking easy to pump out fucking slop, why are people unable to fucking critically think nowadays? They're not able to fucking think for themselves anymore. It's impossible for them. Because of all of the fucking dreck, slop, and nonsense that's just out there nowadays. You can't make a fucking decision for yourself. And it's because of all these fucking companies wanting to harvest your fucking personal data for you so they can push products on top of you. Corporate consolidation for maintenance of hierarchy. The key point to always go back in this video. That is the one main important reason as to why billionaires do this shit.
There's a lot more to be worried about than money. What we ultimately have is money being extracted to systems that do not grow or scale the way a capitalist system does, by expanding the assembly line or opening more chain restaurants or researching and patenting a new type of refrigerant. And I am personally convinced that the market will crash again and more money will be borrowed and printed that will ultimately be invested into the further transformation into a rent-based economy. During World War I, America's debt to GDP ratio was 35%. In World War II, as we strained every single resource that we had, it skyrocketed to 121%, meaning that we had 21% more.
Yeah, you had a lot more debt because guess what you were doing? You were constantly buying stuff in order to fight the fucking war. Equipment, clothing, rations, supply, whatever. This is where I started to get really fucking mad.
More debt than value as a nation. Our debt to GDP ratio once again skyrocketed after the 2008 crisis, and it just kept rising. And right now, we are at 123%, higher than it.
This is fucking insanity. Oh, but don't worry, guys. If we keep doing tax cuts for the billionaires, you know, that'll make it go down, guys. Truly. This was what made me fucking mad. Because we know what the fucking solution to the problem is. A Green New fucking Deal. A new deal. Taxing the fucking rich. Going after those fucking speculative markets. Regulating the shit out of these motherfuckers. Keynesian economics. Yeah, brother, I don't know about that. Sounds woke. Yeah, time for your life to get fucking worse. This was mind-numbing. We know how to fucking fix this. But no one's gonna fucking do it. No one. And it's only going to get worse as the economy keeps constantly crashing over and over and over again. More and more money needs to be fucking printed in order to try to stave off a complete fucking collapse. All in the meanwhile, private equity firms, banks, real estate companies, everything, all the food companies, the car companies, every fucking company you can think that you can think up of is going to go on a constant fire sale, purchasing fucking assets of shit that's crashing in order to further consolidate more and more fucking power. We all know about the age of the corporate merger. You can also throw that in there as well. All of these giant corporations constantly merging with one another to constantly make more and more super corporations. Marx also talked about this before. There's only one way for capital to go, and that is in further and further consolidation amongst fewer and fewer hands. Until there's essentially nothing left besides your hyper omega corp. I wonder if this goes up against modern monetary theory. I don't really know, honestly.
It has ever been in the history of our economy. Our national debt as of February 2025 is $36.5 trillion, and our total debt is $102 trillion. I would say that we're well past the point of no return, but I don't even know what that is because this is so unprecedented. And I assume that it would be easier to change the value and concept of money than it would be to repay that level of debt. And it's worth pointing out that the primary owner of that debt isn't China or Japan or even our own Federal Reserve. It's US investors. As this cycle continues to snowball, money will be less and less valuable, not only because of inflation, but in principle. When the government is so closely entangled with the people who have benefited the most from this mass extraction of wealth from a capitalist economy, it stops making sense to think of wealth as money. Hear me out. Here's a helpful metaphor from the book Stalin, the Court of the Red Tsar. There's a story where Stalin and his powerful entourage of officials was traveling by motorcade when they came across a peasant woman struggling to push her cart up a hill.
I like this metaphor.
Stalin saw this and ordered the cars to stop and inquired about her situation. He wanted to give her some money to help her, but not one person in his entire entourage had a single ruble of cash on.
Wonder why these guys don't have any cash on hands. I mean, the MLs would say, like, what do you mean? Stalin already abolished the money form at that point. It's like, yeah, he sure did. Sure.
On them. And that's because their wealth was in ideological power and influence. They didn't need cash because no matter how lavish their appetite, whatever they desired would be given to them. It wasn't until the deeply organized experiment of communism fell that the Soviet ruling class had to convert their wealth to a tradable commodity as oligarchs. Unfortunately for oligarchs, money can't buy everything. Money alone can't change laws. It can't force people to dress the way you want them to dress or to identify in a way that aligns with how you see them. It can't make ideologies against the law. It can't allow you to change the race, culture, or ethnicity of your neighbors. You can't buy someone else's choice to be or not be a parent. To graduate.
You can try, but it can't.
Or transcend from those unfathomable limits of what money's wealth can get you, you need to control the power of information so that you can manipulate the world that you live in. And I believe that that is exactly what's happening, and unfortunately, I think it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. If you've stuck with me this long to listen to and consider my entire manifesto here, thank you. And all I ask is that you consider the information in this video when you make personal decisions, read the news, or spend your precious time on this planet participating in the post-capitalist economy. I suppose you want some advice on how to educate yourself about current events when...
So I believe he does like a little sponsorship segment. Yeah, I think he does a little sponsorship segment. We're pretty much done here. Yeah, it's quite a depressing end. This is where it's inevitably going to lead, right? The fact that more and more consolidation in corporate power is being concentrated in the fewest hands possible. Eventually, like, it's going to swallow entire governments. You're eventually going to have, like, the one world megacorp. That's, like, all the fucking dystopian nightmares that you see in movies, that's what it's being built towards. You know, your 1984s, Idiocracy. We all know the sort of, like, cultural sort of, like, pillars of movies that talk about these broader things. And I guess this is going to be my sort of conclusion. But we all know, like, if shit like that doesn't get you fucking mad, then I don't know what does. We live in a fundamentally rigged economy and system. There is solutions to the problem. The question then becomes are we too far away? Like, would Keynesian economics even be able to sort of stop this further, like, concentration of wealth and creation of the one world megacorp from happening? Is the story of Wall-E going to be inevitable? I don't know. Right? I do think that it is probably going to get a lot worse before it gets better, but we'll see. I think we could have modern technology under that. And maybe I don't think the Wall-E is going to happen yet. Eventually, I mean, but this is why you constantly see like, just like what was being described there earlier by Ben Jordan. He also mentioned, hey, why on earth, like, think of it this way, why do you think like all these fucking tech billionaires and shit like that, all these oligarchs want to have more and more consolidated control and capture? Because they don't want to fucking deal with the world anymore. They know that climate change is the thing. It's going to wipe out most of the human population, probably. And they want to have their super mega bunkers with robots that they can live out the rest of their lives with. That's pretty much the point. I'm liking what I'm seeing in the Linux sphere these days. Prefiguration, all economic centers is the next step, folks. Yep. It's why I think they want a war, kill and distract many of the peasants. Well, that's sort of the point. Well, it's not just war. It's all about, like, you don't need war to do that anymore. The reason why dictators do war in order to stir up national sentiments is because they want to distract from their own failing economic policies within their regime. That's why Putin did it with the war in Ukraine. But that's a different topic. The reason why all these tech oligarchs are constantly buying up sources and outlets of fucking information is because what do they want? They want to be able to distract you from being able to recognize that more and more wealth is concentrating under them before you can like recognize and be like, wait a minute, hold on. I'm getting like some form of class consciousness and I'm learning about like, why do these billionaires have so much corporate consolidation and control? What's going on here? It's a little weird. We know why. Maintenance of a hierarchy and a system of control. That's what it's all about in the end, obviously. We know. And it's going to be difficult to stop. It's at a completely ridiculously unprecedented level. And it just makes it really difficult to sort of like engage with, man, what can we do in order to stop this? And that's like the sort of like ultimate question. When we're talking about like such ridiculously abstract concepts like this, like, is it like just like a proletarian revolution to get rid of like all the bourgeoisie? Is that gonna work? Probably not. Like, yeah, keep in mind, like, the CCP also wants this as well. It's not really much of a difference, right? Everyone is overall sort of like controlled by capitalism in the end. We all know. Maybe a different approach, same outcome. Pretty much Boy Meets Mini. And the idea that like it's not just because of like wanting all the money that like billionaires more and more so are talking about like a politics and trying to get into it, like Elon Musk is and the other like billionaires, because they just want more control. That's what it's all about. They're not going to stop until they have control of absolutely everything. That's what it ultimately comes down to. Because guess what? They already have control of all the financial levers. What's the next step after the financial levers? Information so they can control how you think. So then you don't have the ability to question what's going on. That's the next step. And eventually the whole corporatocracy thing will become a reality. That's what's going to happen. But the thing is eventually, like, it's just not going to work out. I don't think it works out ever. This system will collapse in on itself. And hopefully, like, it hasn't gone to like a particular place with like technology or whatnot that that billionaires are fully able to take control of your thoughts and not question about the maintenance and the society of control that they are trying to build.